All right. So to kick it off, do you think you could just tell us a little bit about your background, like how you kind of started playing the sport and different teams you played for?
Yes. So I'll try to give you the shorter version. I have a tendency to talk quite a bit. I think a lot of coaches do. I started playing when I was 15 years old, which in today's, lacrosse community, that's rather late.
Mhm.
Um, I was at a family reunion. A cousin showed up with a pair of lacrosse sticks, and he said, "Hey, Scotty, do you want to face off?" I said, "What's that?" I had no idea. So we faced off. We passed around. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I went to school the next week, and over the intercom, they announced anyone interested in playing for the team, meet in the team room after school. We'll have a team meeting, and you can play lacrosse. And because I had social anxiety, I didn't go. The following year, the same thing. That intercom came on, and there was that message: "Hey, anyone interested in the lacrosse team, meet in the team room." And I sucked it up and went to the meeting and played for Skyview High School in Cache Valley. I served a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I played off and on for Utah State. I've been on a number of club teams, men's teams, and then now I'm here coaching at Utah State. That's the short version. We'll say that was the shorter answer of the longer possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how did you end up being the head coach at Utah State?
So I'd actually fallen out of the sport for a couple of years. I had been coaching youth and high school. And when I first started, I was just barely graduated out of high school. And my high school team asked if I would help lead the junior lacrosse program. So we started the youth program at Skyview High School down to fifth and sixth, seventh and eighth grade kids. And I took the seventh and eighth graders, and a dad, his name was Troy Oldham, took over the fifth and sixth graders. And somehow Troy also had a really successful coaching career. He coached at Skyview. I think he's the head coach at Green Canyon High School right now, who are like the fifth or seventh in the state of Utah. Really, really good high school program. But he was actually the head coach at Utah State. And he ended up leaving the program. And when they were looking for a new coach, he gave them my name. And so the team president called me up, asked me to come in for an interview. I met with them, answered their questions, went through a couple different interviews and talking to the team and introducing myself to the program. And then they hired me on. I say hire, but they brought me onto the program in 2018, and I've been the coach there since.
So, kind of going into the team, do you guys have to make cuts usually, or do you usually just have enough people to make the team?
So that first year in 2018 was a rebuilding season for us. We ended the year with 16 guys on the roster. And our second to last game, we played the University of Utah and ended up with 2 guys in the hospital. This is right before they went NCAA Division I. So we went into our last game of the year with 14 guys. It was real, real rough. This year, prospectively, we're looking at about 40 to 50 players incoming into the program. That's recruits, that's freshmen, that's returning players. So we've done a lot to build our program over the last 4 or 5 years. When we get into the spring, if we have to make cuts and be down around that 40, maybe 45 mark, we will. Thus far, we haven't had to, but this might be the first time in my coaching time there that we'd actually have to cut people from the team and have a final roster.
Yeah, we're kind of relating to that same situation over at Purdue right now, but see how it goes. And
Yeah. Well, best of luck with you. I hope you guys get the numbers out there. It's been rough, especially with COVID ongoing, to have consistency and have players be able to compete when there's been so many restrictions in place.
it's a good problem to have, though.
Yeah.
It's as a player, though, it might be fun being on a team with only 14 guys because a lot of reps to be had.
They got to play, that's for sure. They got to play and they got to run and they got to be tired.
Run a lot, yeah, I'm sure.
So, how often do you guys practice?
Right now in the fall, we've tried to work out more consistent, a better practice schedule than what we have. Because we are a club sport with Utah State, they're limited on field space and field availability and gym space and gym availability. Right now, what they're allowing us to do is 2 practices a week. We're trying to bump that up to 3 during the fall. And then in the spring, we're minimum 4 times a week, maybe 5 if we feel that we need the extra prep work for a game that's coming up over the weekend or something.
And do you guys have like lifting or film sessions at all with the team?
Yes, we do film sessions. We've taken a couple different approaches to lifting and conditioning. We've had conditioning coaches. We've gone through the university with the school. We've given the guys responsibility and say, okay, this is now on you because we had attendance so low. This year going into it, we worked something out with Utah State. We'll have a strength and conditioning coach, and they will have their conditioning sessions. I think we're at 5 a.m. right now for the fall. That might be bumped up to 6 if we can work out a deal with the ROTC program on campus. And then in the spring, we'll hopefully continue that and kind of taper off as we get more into just full stick practices.
Going back earlier, you also kind of talked about one of the reasons your team is growing so much is the recruiting. So when you do that, it mostly in-state Utah kids, or kind of what's your approach when you're doing that?
I will talk to anyone and everyone. If someone expresses interest in our program, the way that it's historically been is guys do not come to Utah State to play lacrosse. They go to Utah State for an education. They go for a degree, such as in engineering, in business, in aviation, programs that Utah State is very good and successful with. What we're seeing now is guys are expressing interest in Utah State because of the lacrosse program, not just because of their education opportunities. So a majority of my kids initially were either from out of state or from down south further in Utah, because those kids want to get away from home but still want to stay in state, don't want to pay out of state tuition. We've had kids from Washington, from California, from the East Coast with Virginia. We even had a player my first year from Japan come and play for us, an exchange student that came in and participated on that team. So we kind of recruit from all over. We've done more to work with in-state kids, and I've definitely met with a lot more out-of-state players. So they're really coming from all over.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you've only been the coach there for a few years, but you've kind of been involved in Utah lacrosse for a while, it seems like. Have you any differences over the past 10 years, and especially with Utah going Division I, were there any big changes in the state after that happens?
Absolutely. When I first started coaching, that was in 2008. It was a year after I graduated from high school. The youth programs then, the youngest that you could start was 5th grade. And even then we had 3 5th graders on the team. Where it is now versus then, I mean, when I was a player, they were talking about making lacrosse a varsity program and no longer having it be a club. I mean, that was how many years ago? A long time ago, like 14 years ago, that they were talking about that. And it's finally come to fruition. And it's taken over a decade to get to that point. So I think it's huge. It's phenomenal. I'm glad that it's happened for lacrosse players. It's unfortunate that it didn't happen during my era, but maybe we weren't necessarily good enough to warrant that kind of varsity status that the high schools have now. So it's come a long way as far as how early you can start, how long you can keep going afterwards. And on a national scale, players out of the state of Utah are drawing a whole lot more attention than they did before. There are easily recognizable names in the lacrosse community that came from Utah, like Brandon Dodd, who plays for Air Force, or Bubba Fairman, who came from, down south in Sandy. Those are Utah players. Those are Utah names. And it's just growing. Now with the University of Utah, NCAA Division I, with more players getting better earlier and faster, they're drawing more attention to the state of Utah and the state of Utah lacrosse.
And in terms of your university too, did anything kind of change? Like, did Utah State maybe take a look at going Division I as well? Or
we actually started with NCAA Division I. That's where I came into the program.
Yeah,
still in that bracket, playing against BYU, Colorado State, University of Utah. I mean, we got whooped. We got absolutely smoked by all those guys. It was rough. We've talked to the university and we're working with them to move to at least varsity status. Right now, the burden of a club team is that you have to pay for everything. You can do fundraising. The university does help out, and the university does give you like an allocated amount of money each year, but it's not enough. If you want to be a top program, if you want to be able to compete at the national level, you need to have the facilities and the structure and the logistics to support that. So the fact that some of these club programs can compete nationally and do very, very well year after year without being varsity status says a lot for how hard they are working. It feels like it is a lot easier for teams with the full support of their university as a varsity program. They have an easier time of getting to that level. So we're working on it. I don't know if we'll ever go NCAA Division One. That's probably a long ways off.
Yeah.
We'll probably make the move back up to MCLA Division One. That's maybe a couple years off, but we're going to have a lot more success before we bring up that conversation with the university and moving to NCAA.
Yeah.
So, how is the team kind of viewed by students at the school? Do they just kind of see it as a club, or do they, kind of take it seriously, go to the games, really support the team?
Yeah, we have the advantage of having one of the best student bodies in college athletics with Utah State. Their basketball games, their football games. This is a student body that comes out and supports their team. Even with our hockey team, the students are out and being supportive. With us, whether they liked us or not, they would come to our games and they would support us. Even in 2018, we had a ton of fans coming out because it's what Aggies do. You go to Utah State athletics, you support your team, and you give the other team a really, really hard time. That's just how they are. So for us, I believe there used to be a stigma because when I played off and on for Utah State, mostly in fall seasons, it was kind of viewed as the party team. I mean, when I first started with Utah State, I think it was a roster of 11 guys, which is even worse than 2018. And it wasn't taken very seriously. It was kind of a joke. And I think coming into that as a coach, there was still kind of that stigma. The program is a joke. The players are a joke. And we've changed that. We changed that with a conference championship. We changed that with a run at nationals. We changed that with a number next to our name, which personally I don't think means very much. But to others from the outside looking in, a number next to your name means a whole lot. It means that the rest of the nation has taken notice of you. And so from within, perhaps you should start paying attention as well. And I think that's what's happened with our university.
So you kind of mentioned to be successful, you need good facilities. So what type of facilities is your team able to use right now? Like, is it a club sports facility, or you also talked about the strength coach? So I'm assuming there might be some overlap with the NCAA facilities, but I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, we've got a couple different facilities that we have accessible to us that we're able to utilize. The field house is one. It's kind of an older building on campus, but it is a workout facility. There is area on the interior to have indoor practices, which we have done. It's kind of hard because it's some kind of rubberized floor. So if a ball bounces, it hits the ceiling, which is probably a good like 30 feet up. There is also the Arc, which is a new athletic building that our players and students have access to. The main field that we use is the Aggie Legacy Fields. They installed those when I was attending Utah State in 2008. The fields are still in pretty good condition. They're turf fields. We practice on those every day that we have it available. And then we also have the Stan Lob indoor facility for indoor games. And also during the winter months in northern Utah, when there's 5 feet of snow on the ground, we can end up in there a lot for indoor practices, which is an advantage over some teams that don't have access to indoor facilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're fortunate enough to have some, not full size, but we've got an indoor turf field, which especially January, February, 6 a.m. practices, you don't want to be outside then.
Yeah, it goes a long way to being out of the cold, and it helps with team morale to be able to have good practices without worrying about physical discomfort aside from what you're going to experience during practice.
Yeah, definitely. So you kind of mentioned Utah earlier, and I assume school-wise they're a big rival, but you said that game didn't go too well. But is your team any big?
Game was 1-21, maybe 1-22, and that was with a concussion within the first 3 minutes that ended up in the hospital, and a broken collarbone that ended up in the hospital, I think second half. So that was a rough one. That was a rough one.
Yeah. But do you guys have any rivalries with any other teams that you might play every year too, or just teams you're always competitive with?
Yes. And it seems like every year we add another one. I have been following you guys' Twitter, and I understand there's some beef with Liberty. I might not necessarily ask the details of that, but the way that you feel about them is probably the same way we feel about BYU.
Mm-hmm.
We're not huge fans. I don't like playing them. I don't like going down to see them. They're competitive. I mean, they're a national contender every year. Props to them and what they've been able to accomplish, but I would just rather not. I don't like them too much.
Yeah.
Outside of that, we have found that Montana State is a very big rivalry for us because for the longest time, they've kind of been the kings of RMLC Division II.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we made the move down, they were ranked 7th in the nation and we were unranked, and we beat them in overtime by 1. And then we met them in the conference championship and beat them 9-4, I think, to seal the deal in 2019. So we've really developed a good rivalry with their team. As far as their coach, though, Chris, I love him. He's one of my most favorite people on the earth. He's good friends. I see him at recruiting events, and we'll sit to each other and we'll sit next to each other and chat and talk and get caught up. So I'm good friends with their coach, but my team doesn't like his team. Outside of that, there's been a few others, but I think Montana State is probably the biggest rival that we have just because of the level of competition and kind of vying for that number 1 seed in the RMLC Division I and that guaranteed spot in the national tournament afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of going back to that 2019 team, what do you think made that team so successful?
I think one of the biggest things that made that team so successful was the year before. In 2018, like I said, I think we won 2 games and we lost the rest by 15 or more goals. Like we had a really rough time. However, all of those guys, that roster of 16, with the exception of going off to serve LDS missions or transferring to a school for education, came back. Regardless of the fact of how badly we got whooped, they returned. They came back. Our guys had learned and understood what it was to lose and what it was like to lose badly. And so we felt that at that time, we were deserving of something else. We were deserving of a change. And that change was winning. And that change was success. And that change was bringing a level of competition that we felt we had earned and gone through fire to understand. So when we came into that season, we thought, okay, we have to work harder than we ever have before if we're making this transition from Division I to Division II. Not for a second did we ever expect it was going to be easy, and we never thought that we were going to go as far as we did. I think it caught us all off guard, but winning that first game and then winning the second game and then the third, we started to realize, okay, we paid our dues, we paid the price. Now it's time for us to reap the rewards. And so that I think was the biggest thing that led to our success in 2019 was the absolute ass whooping we took in 2018.
Yeah, sometimes it just takes some adversity and then grind through. And
There's a lot of adversity.
yeah,
But I wouldn't trade that year for anything else. That really helped make our program what it is now.
mm-hmm. Whether it's lacrosse related or just something you guys do for fun, are there any cool traditions that your program has?
Yes. I don't know how much of them I can share. I don't know how many of them are a big secret. We do have kind of initiation that we do with our players. It's not hazing. Let's just be clear. It is no sort of abusive treatment or whatever, or mental thing. It is something that the older players do with the younger players.
Yeah.
I think I can share that one. They go to a place here in Cache Valley called First Dam, and this is kind of late in the fall. And so being up in the mountains with pond or lake water, it's rather cold. What incoming freshmen are to do is to go and find a young woman on campus and invite her to join him for a dip, really just a dive into First Dam. It's just off of the bridge. I think they do it around 11 or midnight, pretty late. It's all in good fun. We've had police officers show up before, and they think it's great. They hold lights for us so that we can see nobody gets hurt. But we've done that every single year, and it's been just kind of a baptism into the team, a baptism into the program, literally and figuratively, with jumping into chilly waters at night.
That sounds fun. The cold water. I don't know if I
Yeah,
feel too hard, but
it's real chilly. It's really, really cold.
So are you personally still related or have any relationship with any of the high school programs in Utah? Or are
Yes.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So Troy Oldham, who submitted my name to the team presidency to be hired, is the coach at Green Canyon. Two of my players are coaches with Skyview, where I attended high school in Cache Valley. And then parents of players that I coach, individuals that I work with, and people that I just know growing up. It drives my wife nuts because we can go anywhere in Cache Valley and I know somebody, and it's always through the lacrosse program. So we've got connections with all 5 high schools that are in Cache Valley, and then some of the high schools that are outside of it. And what we actually did this last week, for the first time for us at least, was we put on a skills camp, a 3-day camp for youth and high school players to come out. And we reached out primarily to those in Valley high schools and had those guys come out. And we had a great time. They had a blast. It was a lot of fun. We're going to do it every year following this one. And it was a good experience for us to build that relationship with the high schools, just because I feel like they still carry that stigma that Utah State did, a couple of years back, that our lacrosse program is kind of a joke. But for them to come out and to see the talent of our guys, the knowledge of our coaching staff, and to help them get better as players, we had some kids come up to us afterwards and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in your program. What's the next step for me to become an Aggie?" That wasn't why we did it, but to have that kind of reception is a huge deal for us to build that relationship with those high schools.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I guess. Go ahead.
So kind of going off that, so you were talking to a high schooler who was kind of deciding between playing at Utah State or maybe another MCLA team or going to a Division II or Division III team. What would you kind of say to them to help them out with that decision?
If you ever have the opportunity to go play NCAA, regardless of the Division 1, 2, or 3, do it. If you are good enough to step onto a roster at Division 2 or go play for Salisbury or someone like that, 100% take that opportunity. You're not going to get a chance like that again. If you want to play, and I mean play lacrosse over your college career, look at an MCLA program. With NCAA, they have a roster of 48, and the only guys that get to play are the names you hear announced during that game, and that's maybe 15 to 20 names at a time. So the other half of the roster sits on the bench. You have no idea who they are. If you want to play, you go MCLA, because those guys get in. They just have to. They have to play everybody. Everybody has to get time. It's just the nature of the beast. And as you play throughout those 4 years with an MCLA program, you will get 4 years of college lacrosse experience. You will get a different experience with NCAA that you will never forget and that you should always take advantage of. But with MCLA, you will get to play. And I think that's one of the biggest selling points when we talk to high schoolers is if you're good enough, go NCAA. Even if you're going to sit on the roster, you're just still going to have a great time. If you want to play, if you want to compete, if you want to continue being a lacrosse player, you come to us or you go to an MCLA program.
Mm-hmm. And to wrap it up, what are your personal goals and maybe your team's goals for this upcoming fall and spring season?
Mm-hmm. So my goal with Utah State or with any program I've been a part of is to leave it better than I found it. And we try to establish that with our players as well. We tell them to make this program better. We look at the whole more than the individual. I mean, we worry about individual needs. We coach individually when we need to. But for us, the program is going to last longer than any individual player that comes through or steps onto our field. As far as team goals, this year in particular, there's just an understanding and a sense from everybody that we want to take another conference championship. That's ours. We have yet to be dethroned because of the cancellations in 2020 and 2021. There was no conference championship. We still have that trophy. That's us. On top of that, we want to make a national title run. We understand the guys that we have coming back. We understand the kids and the talent that we have coming in. We have a schedule that features 13 ranked opponents in the top 20 of the nation's Division II programs. We understand what it's going to take for us to get to that goal of a national title. But we think we've got the tools, we think we've got the guys, and we definitely have the attitude to make that a reality. So that's our biggest goal. That's our end game this season in particular, is to make a national title run and maybe upset a few people.
Definitely. Well, wishing you and your team the best of luck in this upcoming season. Hopefully gets to be played completely out.
I hope so.
Yeah, I don't even want to mention that, actually. I don't want to jinx anything, but
Yeah. Knock on wood.
yeah. Oh, right here. All right. Well, thanks for taking the time out of your night to talk to us for a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
All right. Have a good one, Coach.
You too. Take care.